Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome back to another episode of the Mysticism Decoded podcast. I am your host, Aleph Lev. In this episode, we are continuing on with the audiobook and analysis of the gateway process. I have been looking forward to doing this particular episode for a little bit now because this is the section that actually kicked off my entire journey, this 2-year and counting rabbit hole, or really more like 2.5 years so far. But this is the section that tied the gateway process to mysticism. Not only Judeo-Christian mysticism, which is where I focus, but it does show you that it is the mysticism of any and all religions that highlights and shows the true nature of reality. Now, if you have been following me and watching my videos, you know I am someone that subscribes to the ancient astronaut theory, and I'm really taking off where scholars such as Zecharia Sitchin left off with the books he started writing in the 70s and 80s. But everything is here laid out as a springboard to send you on whatever path you want. So we have quotes from Tibetan Buddhism. We have references to Kabbalah, Judeo-Christian mysticism. We have references to Hinduism. And without further ado, let's get right into this section. It is really, really fascinating. 34 Belief System Considerations. In 1967, Alexandra David Neal and Lama Yangden wrote a book entitled Secret Oral Teachings in Tibetan Buddhist Sects, from which the following quote is taken. "The tangible world is movement," says the masters, "not a collection of moving objects, but movement itself. There are no objects in movements. It is the movement which constitutes the objects which appear to us. They are nothing but movement. This movement is a continued and infinitely rapid succession of flashes of energy." In Tibetan, this is known as tasal or shug. "All objects perceptible to our senses, all phenomena of whatever kind and whatever aspect they may assume, are constituted by a rapid succession of instantaneous events." Now, we know from prior sections in this document, as I've explained, that God as you know it, you can define him technically as energy in a state of infinity, which means energy in a state of vibrating at the speed of infinity, allowing for a state of all potentiality. And anything that is not all potentiality, which has form, individuality, uniqueness, meaning the universe and anything and everything in it, is simply confined energy. It is energy that is slowed down so that it has its own frequency or sound, which allows it to have its own unique individuality, form, and as a byproduct, location, because energy in infinity is in all places at all times, is all-knowing, is eternal, meaning outside of time and space, no beginning, no end, and it has no location. So you only have a location whenever your energy is not in a state of infinity. And conversely, you can only produce a hologram when you are confined energy, when energy is confined. such as the universe and everything in it. Now, I say conversely because energy in infinity cannot produce a hologram. That is why God perceives the universe and everything in it, but we cannot perceive God in his natural state because God does not produce a hologram. This is something that we've discussed in prior pods, and of course I will be going into this deeply again in my next YouTube series when I start covering my book, Connect to Source, which compares this document to the first book of Kabbalah, the Sefer Yetzirah, or Book of Creation in English, which happens to be the only book to ever be attributed to Abraham, the patriarch Abraham. And as I already alluded to in the beginning of this video, as someone who subscribes to ancient astronaut theory and the Anunnaki, if that's the first time you're hearing this word and this idea, I know I'm introducing you to something totally foreign right now, but Zecharia Sitchin is really the premier author of such things going back decades. But I am submitting to you that Avraham was taught by the Anunnaki and was indeed accompanied by Anunnaki in the setting of the Sefer Yetzirah. And the book was either given to him and called a book of Abraham, so to speak, or more likely, what I believe is the case, the book was a mixture of dictated to him / taught to him and allowed for him to write. But either way, it's the Anunnaki teaching and being involved with Abraham, which produces the first book of Kabbalah, the Sefer Yetzirah. Okay, let's continue. The classic description of the universal hologram is to be found in a Hindu sutra, which says, "In the heaven of Indra, there is said to be a network of pearls so arranged that if you look at one, you see all the others reflected in it." Of course, we know this as a characteristic of holograms, where you can break off any piece of a hologram, no matter how small it is. The rest of the hologram will still be visible in that piece, although if it is a small broken off piece, it is going to be rather fuzzy, yet it is still there. I have cited this quotation because it shows that the concept of the universe, which at least some physicists are now coming to accept, is identical in its essential aspects with the one known to the learned elite in selected civilizations and cultures of high attainment in the ancient world. The concept of the cosmic egg, for example, is well known to scholars familiar with the ancient writings of the Eastern religions. Nor are the theories presented in this paper at variance with the essential tenets of the Judeo-Christian stream of thought. The concept of visible reality, i.e. the created world, as being an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his primary state of being. The absolute at rest in infinity is a concept straight out of Hebrew mystical philosophy. And again, this is what is really known as Judeo-Christian mysticism, being the Kabbalah sect, and the sect that even precedes Kabbalah, Merkava. Even the Christian concept of the Trinity shines through the description of the Absolute as presented in this paper. The description of energy totally at rest in infinity fits the Christian metaphysical concept of the Father, while the infinite self-consciousness resident in that energy, providing the motive force of will to bring a portion of that energy into motion to create reality, corresponds with the sun. This is so because in order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the Absolute must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it. So while the absolute is simply in the state of infinity, it is considered the Father. And when the absolute breaks off a piece of its energy, slows it down, confines it so that it produces a hologram, and it is now perceiving its own hologram, that constitutes the Son, S-O-N. That hologram is a mirror image of the absolute in infinity. It still exists outside time and space, but it is one step removed from the absolute and is the actual agent of all creation or all reality. So what this document is stating is that first God made a mirror image of himself, so to speak, by cutting off a piece of his energy and slowing it down, yet it was a mirror image. And that confined energy, let's call him Aleph, is actually responsible for all of creation. It is one step removed from absolute and infinity, from God, but it is the closest thing possible or imaginable to the consciousness of the absolute. Yet it is still differentiated. And I say let's call him Aleph for specific reasons, but these reasons will be revealed in my next YouTube series when I do start covering my book and the Sefer Yetzirah, and we get into the details of the scripture and what they mean and what they represent. And the Hebrew letters in particular are of extreme importance, as I believe I've already hinted earlier in this YouTube series, that they actually represent not Hebrew letters only the way you have come to know them, but they are actually representative and based off the shapes of the wave interference patterns that constitute this holographic consciousness matrix. And as such, each of them represents a certain level of consciousness as well. So we'll be picking up on that in the next YouTube series, but I just wanted to give a quick summary primer. And the eternal thought or concept of self, which results from this self-consciousness, serves the absolute as the model around which the evolution of time-space revolves to ultimately attain a reflection and union with him. Let's read that again, because that's a really complicated sentence. And the eternal thought or concept of self, which results from this self-consciousness, serves the absolute as the model around which the evolution of time-space revolves to ultimately attain a reflection of and union with him. So this document is stating that this first act of self-consciousness, where God split off a piece of his energy, confined it, yet it was a mirror image, produced a hologram, and as such, God now was able to perceive the hologram from its mirror image, served as the model for how the universe would operate, in which we, meaning the universe and everything in it, produce a hologram that God perceives. Yet, because God is energy and infinity and does not produce a hologram, we do not perceive him in the same way that he perceives us. But what's interesting about this statement is that essentially it is describing a sort of trial and testing method, if you want to call it that. It doesn't state, and we don't know, and I haven't seen anything in Kabbalah, at least not in the Sefer Yetzirah, or heard about it from another book of Kabbalah, that more than one model was tested. So I'll go on a limb and say that the first model is the only model of the hologram, essentially, where the universe produces a hologram, and that is how we are perceived by the Absolute. Yet I do know from other tidbits of Kabbalah that when the wave interference patterns of the universe were created to essentially lay out everything that was to occur in the past, present, and future, that essentially God checked this 4 times. And after the 4th time, it was deemed perfect, so to speak. That's something I have to research more and get more information on. But I just thought it was an interesting tidbit to mention here. Also, I suppose that is why the number 4 may have very special meaning in mystical parlance. Of course, the numbers 444 have a heavy, strong connotation when it comes to angel numbers. And the lore, so to speak, is that when you see the numbers 444, it is meant to inform you that your guardian angels are with you and watching over you and support you. So that's an interesting piece of information to think about, food for thought. That thought model, which perfectly reflects the essence or spirit of the Absolute, fits the Christian metaphysical description of the Holy Spirit. Finally, our description of the universal hologram, the torus of creation, and evolution is neither new nor original. Its use as the figure of the universe, of creation, developing, and evolution is found in various stylized representations in virtually every religious system of antiquity, whether of Eastern or Western derivation. Whether it's the stylized labyrinth once popular in the Hellenic world, the spiralized version of the Hebrew tree of life, or its Hindu counterpart, or the Chinese spiral through the fourfold powers, the ultimate meaning is the same. Mystics the world over, it seems, have perceived the universal hologram in the same spiral form and have incorporated that intuitive knowledge in their religious writings from antiquity to the present. And I submit to you that the reason that the true nature of reality as presented in this document is also written in the books of mysticism of nearly every religion, or not even nearly, essentially every religion, is because every religion derives from and was given to us by the Anunnaki. They are the gods, the Elohim of every religion. The Elohim of the Judeo-Christian Bible is a separate and distinct entity differentiated from Ein Sof. Ein Sof being the Kabbalistic term for God in Hebrew, meaning no end or infinite. So infinite consciousness, infinite creativity, infinite love, and infinite speed of vibrations that allow for this state of all potentiality. Now, I have a special parlor trick that I want to show to you guys to really help drive this idea home that we live in God's imagination, meaning that when God confines energy, he slows it down to the point where in our time-space reality, it is physical and dense. It has been slowed down to the point where it becomes crystallized, dense, and physical, at least in the first four dimensions of time space: length, width, height, time. The fifth dimension, which I submit to you that there is a description for in the Sefer Yetzirah that I have discovered and interpreted correctly, and I am really the first person to do this. It has never been written of in this way or interpreted in this way. But the fifth dimension, as described in the Sefer Yetzirah, I am submitting to you, is described by the word sipur, the Hebrew word sipur, meaning to inform or govern. And its relevance has to do with that it governs the fourth dimension of time. So the reason we experience time linearly the way we do is because of the way the fourth dimension is related to the fifth dimension, which governs how it operates. It essentially intersects at the middle of the fifth dimension, which produces our neat, orderly, linear, moment by moment feeling of linear time. And this is something that I'm going to be going into deeply in the next YouTube series covering my book. But of course, if you don't want to wait, you can go ahead and buy it. It's on Amazon. The link is in the description. But what I wanted to show you guys is a parlor trick to help you understand that we live in the mind of God. And it is equivalent to a digital computer simulation, which is the way smart people who are not spiritual describe it. Yet it is not that, but in functionality, it is equivalent. So just as you can easily imagine anything being possible in a computer game or video game, anything is possible in our physical reality as well. It just needs to be thought of, conceived, and the energy confined properly to produce that result. And our entire universe is literally energy. It is atoms and matter. So anything being possible is simply a manipulation of atoms and energy. Whether it is the golem, which I also talk about from the Sefer Yetzirah, and I prove in my book that it is a real 100% not mythological creature, but produced by a manipulation of atom and energy. And we talked about this in Pod 15, patterning. Or if we talk about something like time travel, why is that real? How could it be that past, present, and future all occur simultaneously? Essentially, anything that you thought of as sci-fi, ETs, black holes, UFOs, ghosts, anything paranormal, etc. There is no limit on what can be physically real, because what is physically real is produced out of imagination. And to produce the results in the physical world, it is a matter of just simply confining, slowing down energy so that it has form, frequency, specific function, time, and location. Whereas conversely, God, Ein Sof, is energy vibrating in infinity, at a state of infinity, at the speed of infinity, as such, a state of all potentiality. So you can see I have highlighted here a Google document titled Bereshit, and that's written in Hebrew if you're not familiar. Bereshit means Genesis, or in the beginning. Let's look at Genesis 1:1. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. Meaning, in the beginning, or you can say Genesis, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, of course, I just made the distinction between Elohim and Ein Sof. So I'm submitting to you that this is not God in the way we know God, but this is the Anunnaki masquerading as God. Now, why do they do this? This is something I talked about more in Pod 1. But the point is that they are not looking to make it easy to differentiate between Elohim and Ein Sof. They purposely make it confusing. And at certain points, like this Genesis 1:1, we see them essentially attributing the power, the creative powers of God to themselves. But it's sort of just like hyperbole or poetry. It's like if you want to feel artistic one morning and you want to create or paint or draw art or write, you say, I am going to create the heavens and the earth today. So essentially it's a poetic, enigmatic type of statement that needs to be decrypted. But of course, in other parts of the Bible, we see the Elohim plain as day, referring to a group of deities that are meeting, talking, debating, etc., etc. And I touch on this somewhat in my book just to provide context. It's not a large part of my book, but in future pods, I do plan to go into it in more detail and do an entire Elohim versus Ein Sof series. Of course, Zechariah Sitchin has wrote about this extensively. The famous lecturer and author Jordan Maxwell does a great presentation on this that you can find on YouTube. More recent authors, you can find Maro Biglino, Paul Wallace. I reference them in my book that they do good work, especially when it comes to El Elyon and Elohim, I believe in Psalm 82. So that's something we'll cover in the future, but here's the parlor trick now. I want you to take a look at the highlighted letters here, Bereshit in Hebrew. And this is Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yud, Tet. In Hebrew, it goes from right to left. So the opposite of English that goes left to right. But look at the letters. Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yed, Yud, Tet. And keep in mind again, what does Bereshit mean? In the beginning, or Genesis. And of course, we understand these implications in regards to the creation of the universe. Now, I've just made the case to you that we live in God's imagination. We live in the mind of God. Now, the beauty of the Hebrew alphabet, one, I already gave you a preview, is that these letters actually represent wave interference patterns, not written like this font because this is script, but written in, not even sure what the exact right word is to describe the plain text font, but this is script. So the wave interference patterns are not in this style, but the normal alphabet, which is also harder to draw those letters by a good margin. But okay, Bereshit, meaning in the beginning, or Genesis, having to do with creation. The letters, you are now familiar. I'll say it one more time if you've never heard the name of these letters in Hebrew before. Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yud, Tet. Now, if you unscramble the letters, you have the following two words. Bait or Beit, Rosh. Beit Rosh. Bet, Yud, Tet, Resh, Aleph, Shin. The same letters that we have in Bereshit, we have in Beit Rosh. Now, what does Beit Rosh translate to? As you can see below, Beit or Bait translate to house, and Rosh translates to mind. So if you unscramble the letters, Bereshit, you get Beit Rosh, house of the mind. The English word for this, I believe, is anagram. I'm not 100% sure. There is a specific word for whenever you can unscramble a word and turn it into a new word or multiple words. But if any of you out there watching think that this is an accident, I just don't have the words to really describe your naivety or naivete. This is not an accident. This is purposely built into the Hebrew language. Let me move it up here so you guys can see it underneath. Oh, forgot. Peace. Oh, God. It gets a little funny when you try to cut and paste when there's Hebrew and English, but you guys get the point. Bereshit and Beit Rosh. Genesis, in the beginning, having to do with creation. Creation exists in Beit Rosh, the house of the mind. So I hope you guys enjoyed that parlor trick. I hope you guys enjoyed this section. This was definitely one of my favorite sections of the gateway process. In the next pod, we'll pick up with section 35. And we're nearly at the end here. Section 38 is where it concludes. So we probably have one, maximum 2 pods left in the series. Thanks again for sticking with me on this. Just like everyone else asked for, if you liked what you saw, please like, share, comment, subscribe. This is a brand new channel looking to get off the ground, looking to spread the truth about the nature of reality to those interested in knowing, who don't like to live their life as sheep. And at the core of this channel is going to be the translation of mystical texts, meaning extra biblical texts, specifically mostly from Judeo-Christian mysticism, Kabbalah and Merkavah, but not exclusively. There will also be the analysis of ancient texts from other religions, but they are going to be translated through this lens of scientific technology, cutting edge scientific theory, as well as ufology. No one else is doing this the way I'm doing it. You have people that connect ufology to the Bible. You have people that connect it to one book of mysticism, mostly just the book of Enoch. But I am going to do it for you through the books that you've never heard of and no one else talks about. You never heard of the Sefer Yetzirah, at least 99% of you. Even 98% of Jews never heard of the Sefer Yetzirah or the other books that exist in Kabbalah and Merkavah mysticism that shed light on the nature of reality, the nature of Ein Sof, the Creator God that is separate from Elohim, the origins of humanity, ET contact with humanity, Anunnaki and others, and it even goes into other ET races and their role in Earth and where they are located even to the point of telling us that there is an ET race living in the inner earth known as the jinn, which is something I won't be getting to for a while, but eventually I will get there. And it is for these reasons that the books of mysticism are considered mysticism and are suppressed, because the powers that be don't want you to know the truth of the nature of reality. They don't want you to know that you could separate spirit from body and know all that there is to know, perceive the past, present, and future, merge your consciousness with God consciousness, to know that the Elohim are a different group of entities from Ein Sof. This is what you call the red pill. And this is why people that go down mystical journeys go down a deep, deep rabbit hole, and along the way have their world completely rocked. But once you know and once you taste it, you cannot go back. So it's just coming down to what type of person do you want to be? Do you want to be someone that doesn't know any better and just lives their life essentially as a sheep, the blue pill? Or do you want to know more? Do you want to know the secrets? Do you want to know the truth? I've picked my side, and I am trying to help those that are also looking to pick the right side. And this is the side of the minority. This is the 1%, so to speak. And you can expect that if you take this side, it will cost you quite a bit. Perhaps friends, perhaps family. But in the end, life is about the evolution of consciousness. And if you're not evolving your consciousness to the maximum extent that you can, then you didn't really maximize this life, this lifetime, in the way that it was meant to be. So thank you all for sticking with me today. Catch you on the next pod when we hit left brain limitations and continue on from there. I appreciate all of you that are subscribing and are sharing. Until next time, Aleph Lev, out.